So we're going to be talking about puppies today. We're going to start with a whole bunch of questions that we know are really common, but we know you guys are going to have some questions too. So feel free to put your comments and questions in the chat. Once we kind of come to the end, we'll go through those. So maybe hold off towards the end. Please do keep yourselves muted throughout the time so we make sure we don't get anybody in the background barking. You may see me do that with my dog, Nina. So we're going to be talking about puppies today. We have another cool webinar coming up on Saturday that is all about enrichment for dogs. So if you haven't signed up for that one yet, please go ahead and do that. For those who aren't familiar with us yet, we're Every Dog Behavior and Training. We are a local Austin nonprofit. Our goal is to try and get access to dog training and behavior resources for people who don't typically get access to it. So feel free to make a donation, buy a t-shirt, hang out with us. You can book training, all kinds of fun stuff. So while I get our screen set up, if we can introduce Miss Jen Burns. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Jen Burns. I am a certified professional dog trainer and a certified behavior consultant. I am out of Austin, Texas. You can find me and my team at Conscious Dog Training, both on Instagram and Facebook. And yeah.
Awesome.
I guess I should say also that I do specialize in really complex cases. And one of the best ways that I have found to give back to the community is not just working with the severe cases, but also teaching puppy owners and puppy families and puppy parents how to prevent and resolve and have early intervention in puppy behavior and training so that we can try to do our best to be proactive so that we can have less behavior issues down the road. And so I find that incredibly rewarding.
Awesome. Cool. All right, guys. So we are going to get started. Oh my goodness. If I can get everything to pull up here. Okay, so puppy training, myths and methods. Question 1, how do I get my puppy to stop biting me? I've tried yelping, saying no, putting him in timeout, etc. What do I do?
Yeah, so for dogs, this is a very general blanket statement, but reinforcement can come in many ways. It can be looking at your puppy, touching your puppy, baby talking your puppy. A lot of different things can be reinforcing. So they don't understand what no is. They don't speak English. So no isn't going to work. And you're looking at your dog and speaking to them. And for them, it's just sort of like blah, 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 blah. Imagine that your puppy were deaf. You're just looking at your puppy, providing attention. And on top of that, you're not asking what your puppy or teaching what you would like your puppy to do. So rather than being reactionary by yelping, saying no, putting them in a timeout, etc., it's really important that we teach our puppies options that we would prefer, train those options, work on those options, so that when your dog is biting, you can ask for those more desirable, preferable behaviors. One of the things I also like to talk to puppy parents about is try to notice when your puppy is biting you. Is it out of hunger? Do they have to go potty? Are they fatigued? Are they, too excited, too nervous, too something? That's a good indicator that your puppy might start biting. So try to be proactive. Make sure your puppy's basic needs are met. Make sure they've had enrichment, they've gone potty, they're not hungry, as that will also help to let you know when your puppy might start to bite so that you can prevent it and intervene before it even happens. So yes, so I like to teach a few what I call default behaviors. And I teach them first. And then when my puppy starts biting me, I actually try to be still like a tree and wait for my puppy to offer those behaviors because they've been incredibly reinforced. They have a super strong reinforcement history so that those behaviors will actually be more reinforced than the biting. So when you do it really well and you do it from the very beginning, I find that the puppies still may bite, but it's on a very low level and they can quickly be either redirected or they offer that default behavior. So biting is a preferred way to handle it is to prevent it, and then to be able to interrupt, but in a positive way, and then redirect. So it's kind of like a 3-pronged approach.
Awesome. So next question that's super common for us.
Yes.
How do I get my puppy to stop pottying inside? I've tried saying no when he goes inside, putting her face in the pee while saying no, it's not working.
Yeah. So a lot of those are really not effective. And when I say really not, I mean totally not effective. And a lot of people, this is hard for people to hear, but potty training, unless there's an underlying medical issue, is primarily a human issue. So this is about us being able to manage our puppies, supervise our puppies, and be very clear about where we would like them to go. So rather than calling them accidents, every time your dog is an accident, that's really a human error. So the best way to do this is to put your puppy on a schedule, try to prevent it, and then interrupt it, but not where you're actually being scary, just a quick, hey, like really softly, and then interrupt and take them to where they should go, and then try to set a timer. So early puppies, especially small puppies, when you're getting them at 8 weeks, it could be every 5 minutes, but the faster that you're errorless, meaning that you have no issues, no potting inside, the faster you'll actually get your dog trained. The more that you mismanage or don't supervise, the more and longer the potting issues will happen. And the recent research has shown that dogs may not have full bladder control until 6 months. So again, this is really, really, really a human-related issue. And make sure to figure out where you would like your puppy to go. Take them there every single time and reinforce them. I try to take puppies out on a leash or a long line and be super, super still when you take them out. Make sure they potty, then throw a party. Then you can possibly take the leash off or let it drag. And I try to use either going inside, or staying outside as the reward. So a lot of winter puppies prefer to get right back inside into the heat. So the faster you can get it outside, going inside actually becomes the reward. For those nicer days and for those puppies that really, really like being outside, try to not go inside right away, because you could be inadvertently creating a negative association with going potty, such as I go potty and then they force me to come inside. So I try to do playing or a little bit of training after a pottying session outside. So it's really up to you to figure out what your dog finds reinforcing, so that you don't create a negative association inadvertently.
Awesome. Okay, our next question. When should I take my puppy places? I've heard he can't ever touch the ground until he's had all of his shots at 16 weeks.
Yes. So this is definitely a question to ask your veterinarian, because you might hear different things on that. But the most important thing is actually to take your puppy places, but you do need to have safety in mind. So things I love to do are taking my dog in the car, windows down, into maybe a construction zone or through an area that has more sound. And I can even stop and sit down and actually reward my puppy for any sounds that might be startling, any movement that might be startling. And I'll do the same thing where I'll take my dog to a parking lot, open up my trunk, and work in the trunk or even the back seat. And on top of that, you can also bring a giant blanket and put it on the ground in a park or at the end of a parking lot, somewhere where you have a bunch of distance. And that way your puppy's not actually having his or her paws on the concrete. You're completely sterilized, and then just take that blankie home and wash it. So there's a ton of ways to take your puppy places safely, so that you're not risking any sort of disease.
Awesome. Okay, next question. What does socialization really mean? My friend said she introduced her puppy to every person and dog she saw, and puppies need to meet at least 100 people.
Yes, and that was a theory quite a while ago. New, more recent research has taught us that it is the quality of the interactions rather than the quantity. So the actual definition of socialization is the process of acquiring the skills necessary to perform as a functioning member of society. So we're trying to provide skills, and there's not that many skills when you're just introducing your puppy at random and at really high rates. So what you really want to work on is making sure every interaction is a learning opportunity. So it's better for your dog to meet 10 dogs, but they're high quality, the interactions are slow and controlled and managed, rather than taking your puppy to puppy class and just having a free-for-all around 50 dogs. Because all that's going to teach your puppy is that when he or she sees another dog, it's going to be all out play, and you're inadvertently conditioning arousal, which can lead to later behavioral issues such as reactivity, leash frustration, a whole other host of issues. Because as puppies, if we're introducing them to everything and then suddenly at a certain age we decide that now we're going to enforce, let's say, rules or structure or leashes, and the dog hasn't learned proper skills, we're going to abruptly rock their world, going from I see a dog and I just get to all out play, or I see a human and they baby talk me and pet me all over. And so we're actually conditioning arousal. That is really, it's not impossible to work on later, but it's just better to consider arousal with every single interaction, because what is happening in those interactions will actually affect the neural connections that are being created at that moment. So if your puppy is meeting someone and they're baby talking and they're being super exciting, there's a ton of jumping, that is going to be indicative and reflective of the neural connections that are being made at that time. So unless you want your adult dog doing that, it's really important to provide them skills to help them socialize. Socialization is also about building resiliency and prepping the brain for future input. So it's really important to think about socialization as preparing their brain, creating resiliency, quality over quantity, and introducing things very slow and controlled. And it's so much more about just other dogs and people. It's about handling and cooperative care and introducing them to different textures and surfaces and moving objects and sounds, and making sure that when it rains, you're taking them out when it's raining and the grass is wet and the concrete is wet. And if there's a storm, pairing the thunder with food and treats so that you can even prevent future phobias from happening. So it's so much more than just meeting people and other dogs. It's really about, gosh, anything that they might encounter, just setting the foundation for that. There's no way we will ever be able to expose our puppies to anything and everything that they are going to see in the life, in their entire life. But what we can do is create the foundations for which they can later deal and work with the things they are introduced to later. So it's teaching them that novelty and variety is normal in their life.
Awesome. Okay, next question.
They're my favorite topic.
Yeah. Next question. How do I prevent food or toy aggression or resource guarding? Should I take his toys away and his food, or hand feed him, or practice putting my hand in his bowl? That should say hand, or say no if he growls. What should I do?
Yeah, this is the question we get all of the time. So if, let's say you're at a restaurant and every time your waiter comes, they take away your food or take away your drinks, you're going to start to create an association that you no longer want that waiter to approach. So, or if someone you meet on the street just comes up to you and starts messing with your hair or your purse, you're like, I don't think I want to be approached anymore. The same is true for your puppies. So what I like to do is I like to use what I call additions. So find opportunities in your everyday life to provide an addition. So not an addition plus a removal, which I would call an exchange. I try to be super heavy on the addition. So let's say your puppy's being really good and chewing on a toy, walk over there, give them a piece of food and walk away. When your dog is eating, the best thing you can do is walk over, put some food down and walk away. So exchanges are not enough. Your dog needs an abundant history of reinforcement history of someone coming over, adding something of value, and then just walking away. So you create a win-win. This is especially crucial in families with kids because more often than not, your kids are going to have things on the floor. The puppy's going to pick it up. They're going to chase that puppy and remove that item. And resource guarding can happen very fast. There also is a genetic component to this, but a lot of it is their environment. So if you need to take something away, such as something that's inappropriate, ideally you'd have a management solution that prevents this from happening, like a puppy safe area. But if you absolutely need to, you would want to offer an exchange to remove that object. When your dog is eating, do not mess with their food. It's like someone coming up to you and messing with your body or messing with your hair or with your food. It would not be pleasant. And it's also not pleasant for your puppy. So do not remove his food. Do not stick your hand in it. Do not pet them while they're eating. That's also very annoying. So what you want to do is let them eat. Just go over as much as you can and provide additions. It would also be lovely if you ditch the food bowl and use food puzzles or training. But regardless, anytime they're doing something like having food, make that an opportunity to walk over, toss some food and move away. If you have tiny humans, make sure you're supervising them, but you can walk with the tiny human, so with them, and take them over to a very safe distance where your dog is not showing any signs of stress. Let them toss something and then move away. The distance is really important because distance can sometimes be stressful. So think of it like a fire. The closer you get to the fire, the harder it is to think, the more stressed you become, and distance provides relief. So in addition to giving them something great and providing a win, you're creating a win-win situation. When your dog growls, do not say no. Thank your lucky stars that your dog is offering a warning signal. A growl is a warning, and typically there are many signs before the growl. There might be a freeze, a lip lick, another cutoff signal being sent to you. There's usually a variety of signals that happen before the growl. Take the growl, take heed, and then really try to think or ask yourself what happened to cause that growl, and then try to counter condition or desensitize it. So no, please don't mess with your dog or their food while they're eating. Please do not consistently remove items from your dog. Always offer an exchange, or better, add something without subtracting anything so that they're always in the positive. And take heed when your dog growls, make a note of it, and then go back and try to create as many positive associations as you can with it. Other great ideas is if you do give your dog a chew, that's a perfect and amazing time to make that a learning opportunity where you're just tossing cookies over to them so they get to have their bone, but also when you approach, it means good things are about to happen. And generally, as you approach, your dog will start to lift their head up, and now you actually have created an operantly trained behavior. So lots of great things come from additions. But also let your puppy eat and have their toys too. So there's no need to annoy them or bother them when they're doing that.
Awesome. Okay, next question.
Yep.
How much should my puppy be sleeping? What's a good schedule for sleep and play?
Yeah, so I actually structure dogs and puppies mostly in 3-hour blocks. So it's about letting them potty, maybe working with them, training with them, take them potty again, repeat, and then a nap, and then repeat again. So baby puppies can sleep anywhere from 18 to 20 hours, just depending on the size of your puppy and their lifestyle. Later, older dogs will still be sleeping about 11 hours a day. So dogs do need to sleep. Baby puppies need to sleep a lot more. I make it a rule of thumb to really not have puppies crated more than 2 hours for your baby puppies, 3 when they're maybe around 12 to 14 weeks. And then I really don't stretch it until they're close to adolescence. So 3 is really my max for a puppy about 14 weeks. Other than that, it should be increments of about 2 hours. So make sure that you are letting your puppy sleep, but don't make them hold their bladder for too long in a crate. That's super important.
Very cool. Okay, next one. How can I get my puppy to stop bugging my older dog? Should I use a squirt bottle or just say no?
Yeah, we get this question a lot too. So this is also a human issue. So this is not your puppies. Your puppies will naturally do this. This is up to you to help make a plan for your puppy, prevent the behavior from occurring, and train them on what you would prefer them to do. So what I mean by that is reinforcement drives behavior. So if it's more reinforcing to hang out or check in with you because you've trained that abundantly, you've established a criteria for which you would like your puppy to do, that will eventually override the behavior that you're trying to reduce. So it's kind of like an ever moving scale. So definitely don't use a squirt bottle because then they will associate you with punishment. For the record, I never, ever, ever use a squirt bottle. I don't think they're effective in any way, and they can be quite damaging. So there's that. And then no does not give your puppy any information on what you would like them to do. So I prevent the behavior from occurring. I, 2, create the behavior that I would prefer to see. And then I slowly change the environment to make it increasingly more challenging until it can be a real life situation. So typically I keep my puppies on leash away from the older dogs, or I use a baby gate or some sort of management tool. Then I train the behavior I would like to see, and then I slowly release the management little by little, making sure the puppy is always successful. Again, this is something where if you train it well, you train it early, this will be a lifelong behavior that you will be able to maintain from an early age. In terms of interrupting the dog, if it's already happening, this is why I like to have a few behaviors that are 99% reliable that can positively interrupt a behavior and redirect your puppy. So again, I like to have some standby behaviors for that so that you can positively interrupt and also be able to redirect in a positive manner. But again, how do you stop your puppy from bugging your older dog is truly about you. And your older dog did not go out and choose to get a puppy, you did. And typically that can be very stressful on an older dog, especially a geriatric dog. So this is about keeping your older dog safe and happy and comfortable, and also preventing any behavior you do not want from occurring in the first place. So management saves you time, it saves you money, so that every behavior you're working on is a penny in the bucket towards what you would prefer. And so this is primarily another human issue. So management is key, teaching the behavior you'd like to see is key, and then having a strategy to interrupt and redirect as a last ditch effort.
Awesome. So next one. How can I stop my puppy from chewing up my shoes? She has plenty of her own toys. Why does she destroy my stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So puppies will eat anything they can really get their teeth on. Their teeth hurt. There's a lot of changes that happen at an exponential rate for puppies. So they can hit adolescence in 6 months, whereas we know how long it can take for humans to hit adolescence. So everything happens at an exponential rate. So again, this is truly a human issue. Try to keep things that you don't want destroyed out of the way. Have a puppy safe area. Teach a variety of behaviors that you would prefer, and then slowly loosen the management strategy to ease them into it. things like shoes or blankets or clothes that have our scent on it are going to be very enticing for puppies, and things that feel good on their gums, which can be wood, cords is a huge one. Couches are a huge one, blankies. So this is really up to us to set our puppy up for success yet again. It really doesn't matter the amount of toys, although rotating toys can be super helpful, but this is a management issue primarily.
All right, next question. How can I get my puppy to walk nicely on leash? She either runs around pulling or gets distracted or refuses to move.
Yeah, so this is one we hear all the time. So I prefer to teach puppies to walk in position. So basically, where do I want my dog when I'm going to walk on a leash? Ideally, our puppies know where we want them and what we want from them before we even add a leash. So the leash should really be considered a tool for safety rather than a tool to maneuver or drive your dog per se. So I actually like to use hands-free leashes quite a bit so that you prevent your hands from going all over. And this is another situation where you really have to teach your puppy what you would prefer. Make sure you have plenty of practice and reinforcement history. So working inside, working maybe in your backyard or somewhere else that's safe, and then starting just in your driveway. If you can't get down your driveway or even maybe down your walkway, it's really, 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 really important that you stay and consider the quality. So stay within their threshold, and your outings, even if they're just 2 minutes, so successful 2-minute outings are going to start to stack up into longer outings. So I consider this like knitting a blanket. So if every time you're successful, it's like your knit and every stitch is tight, which will later create a blanket, and then you can kind of skip some stitches, but your blanket will survive. So every time you take your dog out and there's pulling, distraction, refusal to move, you're creating a notch in your reinforcement history to the negative side. So I like to think of this again as a quality issue. So the faster, we'll get faster progress when we go slow and at our dog's pace. So don't push it. There's lots of ways to provide exercise for your puppy and proper stimulation for your puppy that don't include a perfect walk on a leash. So you can use long lines to set them up for success. We really want to teach them that a loose leash means forward motion, and that walking at our side is so heavily reinforced, and checking in with us is the most fun. So we really want to make sure that we have a very clear idea of what we want from our puppy when he or she is walking. We want to reinforce that in a variety of environments, and then make sure that we have a skill set of what to do when there are distractions or refusal to move. So there's a lot of behaviors I like to do with that. But again, puppies don't know how to walk on a leash. The leash can be very scary. So you have to even be careful about how you introduce the leash. I have many videos of this on Instagram, by the way. So it's really, really important that we introduce the leash properly so that we can prevent the biting of the leash, the alligator rolling. And again, this is not a natural behavior. So this is really up to us to make this positive and reinforcing, and to not push our puppies beyond what their skills are capable of doing. So the more you push it, the slower you will go. So when it comes to leash walking, slow is fast, and actually a lot of things. But again, this is how you can lead to really poor behaviors in their juvenile and adolescent stage. And typically in your adolescent stage, we're going to see pikes and peaks of behavioral issues. And so we really want loose leash walking done beforehand. So this is something that should be practiced almost every day with your puppy, and don't wait until they're fully vaccinated. You should be working on this well beforehand in your house, maybe in the backyard, on your concrete, tons of ways to reinforce this without having to wait until they're fully vaccinated. So again, this is very much a human issue.
You're probably going to hear my dog squeaking her squeaky toy in the background, just so you know. Next question. My puppy growled at me when I picked her up. How can I get her to not do that again? I don't want her to be aggressive. Is something wrong with her?
Yeah, we hear this a lot too. This has to do with a lot of factors. This can be partially genetic. Again, our puppies are always going to have some genetic predispositions, but this can also happen when you pick baby puppies up too much. If you are consistently picking them up, putting them in their crate, or picking them up and doing something else that they don't really like, this happens a lot in houses with tiny humans, because the tiny humans are just constantly picking up the puppies and dropping them, or they're being overhandled and overtouched, and eventually your puppy just isn't going to want it. So again, you want to make sure to let sleeping dogs sleep, no matter what, really. If you are having a hard time at night getting them up and maybe putting them into their nighttime routine, then try to start being more proactive about that. So doing it before they go into a deep sleep, or having ways to kind of wake them up softly from sleep or a sleeping position. This is also about a handling issue. So what I like to do, and again, this is me, but I'm all about shaping and setting the puppies up for success. And if you do that well and right, it will save you so much time in the long run. So I know it might seem like a lot, but it pays in dividends in the future. So I like to do a lot of just handling. So just one touch, one click, one treat. Maybe touch on the other side, one touch, one click, one treat. If your dog is already flinching with an outstretched hand, start in an outstretched hand. So start wherever your dog is comfortable and not showing signs of any sort of distress. And then I like to stand up, put my hands out as if I'm going to pick the puppy up, and then reward, repeat, and then put a little bit more pressure on the dog, reward, repeat, put them down, and then increase it until you're able to pick your puppy up and give them a treat. And again, this takes time and reinforcement, especially if being picked up already has a negative reinforcement history, meaning there are negative associations to being picked up. And so you can start to undo that by making sure that whenever you pick your puppy up, a treat comes and something positive is going to happen. So try to make sure that the puppy will not be dropped, that the puppy is not being overhandled and picked up too much, and make sure that sometimes you might just pick your puppy up, give a quick cookie, and then put them back down. So again, this is very much a reflection of reinforcement history and making sure you're conditioning things. It's not necessarily so correlation is not causation. Just because your dog is growling as a puppy doesn't mean necessarily that he or she is going to be aggressive. It's just a reflection that that puppy doesn't like what's happening. It's really our job to make sure our puppy is comfortable. Again, this is not a natural dog behavior. This is not, you know, when dogs evolved, it was not to just be picked up all the time. And slowly with evolution and breeding and companion purposes, we have done a lot more picking up, but it's important to condition this at an early age and make sure that your tiny humans are not picking the dog up. Make sure the dog is safe. He or she has basic needs met. And you're not interrupting sleep all the time, and that you're pairing it with something positive rather than negative. So it doesn't necessarily mean something's wrong with you or wrong with the dog. It might be a reflection that something in the environment is not so great. And so again, there are lots of ways to condition this and create positive associations and shape it from the very beginning. So there's lots of ways to handle that. But again, as always, your growl is a warning. So try to make sure you're proactive to prevent the growling, and also that you're taking heed and trying to course correct when your puppy is growling. And I think when puppies growl, that means not necessarily in a bad way, but that probably means that you need a little bit more help and guidance in the puppy training process. And it's better to get early intervention from a qualified professional rather than just hoping it goes away, because that's usually not the case. So that would be a great sign and an indicator that you might need a little bit more support than you have at that time, or potentially a different trainer if you do have a trainer and you're not getting any results.
Awesome. Next topic. How long is puppy stage? When will he stop biting or be potty trained, etc.?
Yeah. So this is really interesting. Technically, the puppy stage ends at 12 weeks or somewhere around there. It really depends on the breed and genetics and a lot of factors, but they, as a general rule, will hit a juvenile stage at around 12-ish weeks. So that can be maybe 14 weeks, maybe 16 weeks, depending on the dog. So unfortunately, it ends pretty fast, but that doesn't mean that the biting will stop or potty train. So like I said, potty training is a human issue, and it's a great goal to shoot for errorless potty training. But again, like I said, puppies may or may not have full bladder control by 6 months. So that's what a lot of the new research says. So again, the potty training is truly up to you. If you have a very inconsistent reinforcement history or inconsistent structure, potty training will take longer. Medically and physiologically speaking, they will have the capacity for full bladder control around 6 months. But behaviorally, it's going to take longer if the training has been inconsistent and there's been a lot of mismanagement there. And again, always check with your vet. And the biting stage will come in phases, truly. So the biting stage from 8 to 12 weeks is going to be a little bit different than at around 12 weeks when they start to lose a little bit of their baby teeth. They can be very painful. So they're trying to teeth those puppy teeth out of the way. So make sure they have tons of options, tons of chewing options. Tug is a great way to also help soothe and get those teeth out. So there will be an escalation in the teething around 14 to 16 weeks, give or take, and then a little bit after when they continue losing those teeth. It'll be a lot more challenging when they're losing their molars because those are much larger and much more painful. So you'll start to see blood, you'll start to see an increase in mouthing and just a really significant need to chew. That doesn't necessarily that they'll be biting you, but their teeth will hurt. The biting will stop and can stop. So the mouthing can and will stop pretty early if you are doing it well and doing it right. So that doesn't mean that they may not have the urge. It just means that you've created a really strong reinforcement history where they will offer the behaviors that have been more reinforced, like a default sit, is really, really helpful. So really the biting stage, aside from teething, is going to be a reflection of reinforcement history. Puppies can mouth for a year and later once they're actually adults if you don't have a solid reinforcement history. I mean, I go into some cases and the large, full adult dogs are mouthing and biting my hand as I walk. So the biting is really a reflection more so, again, of what you're doing in your reinforcement history. Technically, most insane and intense teething will end when all of their teeth are out and their adult teeth are in. But technically, the puppy stage officially ends somewhere around that 12 to 16 weeks as the dog and puppies start to mature and transition into the juvenile stage.
But if you ask them, many of them will say that the puppy stage lasts forever and you should continue to give them all of the treats all of the time.
Yes.
Next question. How do I get my puppy to stop crying in the crate? Should I ignore her and let her cry it out?
Yeah, so this is a very fine line. One of the first days I get a baby puppy, the first thing I'm doing that day is starting to condition the crate. So That's letting the puppy go in, shaping it. Maybe it's one paw, then two, then three, then four, then a turnaround. And I'm making sure the puppy can go in and out confidently. And I might work on that most of the day. So I really, really actually like to get puppies early on the day that I acquire that, so that I can have enough time to reinforce this before nighttime. If you don't, some breeders will have worked on crate training prior. Some rescues do a great job of crate training prior to getting your puppy. So it's going to depend again on the reinforcement history and also what you do when you get them. So if your puppy is showing a lot of signs of stress, you may want to consider something more like what I call puppy zen den. So more of a enclosed area rather than a crate. You can also keep your crate close to your bed. You can sleep by the crate the first couple of nights. Ideally, I like to condition them to the crate most of the day, where I condition the door closed and then open, and then I try to put them in there when they're sleeping or before they go down. A little bit of crying and whimpering is normal. If you start to hear a high-pitched yelp that is consistent and high-pitched and high frequency, that's a good sign of panic and distress. And I will go back to the crate. I will wait for them to, at least take a deep breath. Anything that seems like they have calmed down and reset, and I will calmly open the crate. So if a puppy is showing signs of distress or panic, I don't let them cry it out, because that can actually damage some things in their behavior repertoire. So I will go over to them. I will wait for them to just take a deep breath, show a sign that they have decompressed a little bit, and I will open it. And then again, that's feedback that you really, really, really need to work on crate training. I think that creating separation and crate training early on is priceless, because at some point in time, you are going to have to be separate from your dog, and creating that separation slowly and positively from the very, very beginning will again pay in dividends. It is crucial in emergencies. You know, we've seen hurricanes and fires and floods and blizzards now, and rolling blackouts, that it is important that your dog can quickly, safely be transported or rescued, which I've seen quite a bit. And being able to safely have your dog in a crate, even for surgery issues or future medical issues, is just crucial. So whether or not you plan to crate your dog long term doesn't really matter. I think it's so important for potty training, for management, for prevention, to set your puppy up for success, to have a really positive association. So ideally, again, we're creating positive associations and letting our puppy go in the crate, closing the door, and letting them come right out, so that they don't always learn that I go in the crate, get separated for long periods of time, and I'm very stressed out. So I'm always separated. It's really important that you teach them to go in, that sometimes the door will close, you'll get a cookie and a food puzzle, and then you get to come right out. So again, creating a multitude of win-wins. So really, you're training and conditioning your puppy in successful sessions that might be small, but each session will build. And then it is important, if your puppy is showing signs of panic or distress, that you don't let them cry it out. There will be a point where they whimper, maybe for a couple minutes, maybe 3. If it's over 10, you do need to go in there. So there is it's such a fine line, because we do want to eventually help them learn how to feel and find calm and decompress on their own. It's a very, very, very important life skill for them. But there is a fine line between that and panic. So truly, that's just knowing your puppy and knowing when you can push it just a tiny bit And also know when they are over threshold and actually panicking. So that's going to differ from puppy to puppy. But again, this is making sure the crate is positively conditioned, making sure that you've conditioned separation, and making sure that your puppy isn't panicking. So again, it's a fine line. If your puppy is truly showing signs of panic, please go get them. And some puppies will be panicking so much that you just have to let the puppy out and take that as feedback. This is something to push to your priority list for a safe and as a safe management tool and safe way to separate your puppy. So again, behavior is truly feedback. Take that behavior as feedback for what you need to change, work on a little bit more, work on a little bit less. So sometimes you're going to let them just whimper, not cry it out, but kind of whimper. But any longer than, I would say, gosh, 6 minutes, even 5 for me pushes it, means you really do need to go back and get them. If they cry for a minute and you go back every time, yes, you will be reinforcing the crying. If they're panicking and you don't get them, that will actually reinforce the panic. And the longer they're in that state will affect what you do and how your next session goes. So again, it's a super fine line, and seek help on this one, when to know when it's okay to get them and when it's not. So make sure you find that fine line between letting them learn to decompress on their own and panic, because there's a fine line, and it's really up to us to explore that and to create the previous reinforcement history of how fun it is to go in the crate, have the door shut, and come right back out as well.
Awesome. Next question. How do I get my puppy to calm down? She gets so crazy and won't settle. Should I put her in the crate? She won't listen to me when she's like this.
Yes. So puppies do have these witching hours, if you will. They're typically conditioned to your household. So this might happen, if you've got tiny humans when you're getting them ready for school. It might happen in the afternoon when they come home. It might happen at nighttime when you're putting them down to bed, or they're kind of rushing to get ready for the next day. So that will create arousal for your puppy. And if it's a free-for-all, you will start to get those associations to those times of day. There are times when your puppy will have to potty, or they're hungry, or they just ate, or they're super excited and they just have the zoomies. That's pretty normal. There's times where I just open the door and kind of let the zoomies happen, just to let them get it out. There's times I interrupt and redirect. And again, this is really so dependent on your reinforcement history with your dog. So if you can approach them, and I actually condition 1 and 2 things. One is a gotcha. So it's just a quick, you're not even grabbing the collar. I like to say it's just a collar touch, and reinforcing it. And I say, gotcha, reinforce it. And then I start to build time on that. So I'm approaching my puppy, putting just tiny touch on the collar. I say, gotcha, give a treat, walk away. And then I start to say, gotcha, and I treat slower to create duration. I also do a reverse gotcha, where I will train the puppy to come to my hand and either do a chin rest, or where they take their collar to my hand. So if you have a history of being able to get your puppy, slowly talk to them, softly start to do long strokes of petting. If you are trying to get your puppy to settle down and you're chasing them and you're like, hey, stop. You're actually going to create more arousal. If you try to kneel, squat down and say your puppy's name, call them over, create just an environment of calm and help them take a deep breath. That's really, really, really helpful. Sometimes if they're doing this, I'll interrupt, kind of get them calm, work with them for a little bit, and then maybe put them in their crate. Just if they need a nap, they can get overtired. So signs that a puppy is overtired is increased biting, they're just kind of puppy crazy brain. Their eyes might look a little different to you. You might see a lot more white in them. They're just kind of frenzied and just kind of frantic. Ideally, check the clock. This might happen on a pattern. So a great way is to prevent this. Maybe go outside, do some rapid recall games, do some training games, do tug. I love tug so much. That's a whole other topic, but there's ways to prevent it, ways to interrupt it, and then ways to redirect it. Typically, once I get them calm, I will maybe put them on leash, let them settle. I also have a relaxation that's like a progressive relaxation exercise that I do with puppies almost daily, so that once I get them on leash, they just learn to settle on their own. I'll bring out the mat and it's conditioned. That's one of my favorite ways to deal with it. It's not really great to interrupt the frenzy and just put your puppy in a crate, because that is creating an association that when I go and get you, I'm going to pick you up, which you may or may not like, and then I'm going to separate you, which you may or may not like. So that has a pretty high risk of creating a negative association. So I try not to go get them, pick them up, and interrupt them. I much prefer to train a gotcha, train a really fun recall, do a name recognition, redirect them, redirect to a game of tug. I do this in a lot of ways, but I typically just don't get them and put them in a crate. When they won't listen to you, there is always a way to get them back. This could be the name recognition again. This could be showing a toy, squeaking it, being able to redirect their attention. When they get like this, they are no longer, to put this very simply, in the front part of their brain, where that's their operant state of mind, where they're learning and making decisions and making choices. They go to their hind brain, which in a very simple term is their reptilian brain, if you will. And they're no longer thinking and processing. So it's our job, again, to create a skill set that can help them when they're in this state. And that happens when we train them to go from their back part of their brain to their front, and their front to their back. And I do this with a lot of arousal up, arousal down games. So there is always a way to get them back. And how you do that, it can be done in a variety of ways. Again, it helps to have it conditioned. It helps to have a management plan. It helps to prevent this from occurring. Sometimes you're just gonna let them run it out because that's totally normal and cute and adorable. And sometimes you're going to find a way to redirect it. It's best to intervene as soon as possible if you're going to interrupt the behavior. Sometimes you just need a good round of zoomies and calm them down, bring them back, interrupt it a little bit with some cookies, and then they might go do it again and they'll circle back to you, reinforce it. And that will help them start to learn that it's okay to be fun and crazy, but you'll also get rewarded when you come and check in with me, and then you'll also get to run again. So again, this is always on, there's a lot of gray, there's a lot of spectrum here. But sometimes you might want to run, but there's always a way to get them back. Sometimes you want to interrupt it, and that's okay, but you want to interrupt it safely in a way that's not startling them or creating any fear or anxiety. So again, this is why I like to have 3 or 4 behaviors that are their default behaviors that work every single time. So when they get like this, they know that they have, 1 to 5 choices of things that work every single time. My dog still does this, but then he will go to the scares. That's kind of one way that he takes a break on his own, or he'll go to one of his beds and just breathe. And then he may start it all over again, but he has these safe spots in which he calms himself down quite a bit. Especially if we're outside, I've conditioned him to check in and he can go play. So this is about creating those default behaviors that work all of the time, interrupting early, preventing the behavior, and then being able to redirect the behavior, and also just knowing when it's a situation where they just need to run it out. And again, evaluating their basic needs. Have they eaten? Are they tired? Are they overexcited? Are they actually doing it from stress? So you may go to the vet or you may groom them and then they go crazy. And that is their way of displacing all of the stress that they experience. So there's usually an association. There's usually something happening. Sometimes puppies just do this out of nowhere, and that's okay. But there usually are some indicators that it's about to happen. So again, recognizing those precursors of what would be called antecedents, intervening then, training behaviors then, and letting the dogs create win-win situations and have behaviors that work 100% of the time. The one thing I will not do is pick them up. You will run after them, chase them, pick them up, or just immediately put them in their crate, because again, these are puppies and it's not something that should be punished. It's something that should be managed. It's something that should be worked with, but it's not necessarily something that should be punished, because it happens and they're puppies and it's great. And it's a learning opportunity and a training opportunity. And it's really full of opportunities. It's not something that should be just punished immediately.
Awesome. Next question. What should I do if my puppy seems afraid? She won't get in the car, barks at bicycles. I've tried telling her to stop and just putting her in the car so she learns it's okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but a lot of this should be exposure in a slow and controlled way. Gosh, there's so many ways to deal with this, but the best way is to cut this down into blocks in which your puppy is still making those positive associations, but not tipping over to where they're showing a ton of avoidance and panicking. So let's say she won't get in the car. There are ways that you can get close to the car and then create some distance. Get a little closer to the car, give some distance. It's very important that you provide a win-win again, because then it's not so fearful to go to the car, because they always know they have an exit strategy. Dogs don't naturally know that they can take distance or turn around. So sometimes when you put them in these situations, they don't trust or know that they have a way out. And so they will fight you. They will show tons of sign of fear because they don't have any other options or a way to say no. So you want to break this up into chunks in which they are successful. So getting them as close to the car that you can without them panicking or showing signs of panic, and then letting them move away. I usually like to reward where their threshold is, and then toss a treat away. So it's a win-win. This is also called treat retreat. And then start trying to get closer and closer and closer to the car. And then again, helping them get in the car, moving away. Picking her up upon consent. This is something we talked about with picking your puppy up again. Gosh, there's so many ways. There's the 1, 2, 3 game where you give them notice. There's consent behaviors you can train. Telling them to stop won't work, because again, this is truly up to us to give them the skills and the support to show them that these things aren't as fearful. It's really, really important, like you would with a child. You wouldn't just force them into the situation. You wouldn't make them dive off the deep end. You would work with them until they're ready. You would give them choice and consent until they're ready. So the barking at bicycles, this is really hard. This is a socialization thing that I work on at a very young age. I use engage, disengage for moving objects, bicycles, people, sounds, because I know those are going to be lifelong triggers if we don't work with it early on. I do that for birds, squirrels, objects, skateboards, bicycles, cars, scooters, all of those things on moving objects I start to work with at a young age. So I do the engage, disengage, or I pair it with a cookie. So I'm creating those positive associations early on. If you're at an older age, that's totally fine, but you want to take a distance in which they're not showing signs of stress and pair it with something positive. So make sure you're always bringing food on the go as insurance. So here's the bicycle, here's your cookie, here's the bicycle, here's your cookie. But again, making sure you're at a distance in which they can be successful. If you're at a distance where they're going to show a ton of fear and maybe not take food, you're way too close. So you want to make sure your dog is still able to take food, is still checking in with you, is still able to offer your default behaviors, because you can use those as temperature checks. So can you move forward? Can you not? And sometimes it can just be a foot. Sometimes it's half a foot. And that's okay. That's their threshold. And you want to work with it. Again, slow is fast. So you always want to be pairing these things with food. Of course, there's times where you absolutely have to get them in the car, and that's okay. Picking them up, putting them in a carrier, making sure they're safe and secure in the car. So I have actually have this hammock that I love from Orbis. It's the quilted hammock with a mesh window, so they can get air from the front or ideally air from the back. So they have, they can see you. They're also really safe and secure. They're not slipping around in the car. And I do really short car rides at first, maybe 2 minutes, with help from someone or a squeeze tube, or honestly, even whipped cream, which gets me super fast results. I just give them the tiniest amount, like a pea-sized amount. Sometimes it's on my fingers, sometimes it's in a squeeze tube, like I said, and I just give them teeny tiny licks just to make it super fun the whole time. There's a whole counter conditioning and desensitization protocol you can do, but again, it's breaking it up into successful chunks. When you absolutely have to do it, try to make that a rarity and try to make tons of opportunity for reinforcement and desensitization before throwing them into the deep end. So early on, you will have to go to a vet visit, and you're going to want to make that as positive as possible. Plan ahead, bring some chews. Try not to feed them a whole bunch so that they don't get car sick, because that can also have an effect on them. Pair it with chews and bones and food puzzles. Don't be stingy, especially when there's a fear involved or a phobia. Do not be stingy. You want to kind of throw everything you can at it. And then try to limit the times your dog is flooding. So think of flooding as if it's a beach. You got your tippy toes, that's okay. You can go a little bit deeper, but you can still see and breathe. And then the more you get into deeper waters, it happens really fast where suddenly you're underwater. And that happens the same as puppies, and it can happen so fast. It can happen within 6 inches of something. And it depends on the environment, of course. But if your dog is experiencing fears of things, you have treat, retreat, you have desensitization and counter conditioning. You can train this operantly with engage, disengage. I tend to do all of the things. And then, of course, you're going to get into a situation where you absolutely have to get your dog into a car or maybe a carrier. Do your best to prevent that. But again, if you have to do it, just try to pair it with everything positive that you possibly can, and make sure that after the event happens, that you go back and make it so fun and easy without flooding them over and over and over again until they have successfully overcome the fear. The younger the puppy is, the better your results will be. So when it's in that critical window for socialization, after adolescence, or if it's happening in adolescence, it will take a bit more time and patience. If they're an adult dog, again, just a bit more time and patience, and then your results will also be determined by genetics. So how quickly the puppy can restart, reset, or pick up on things is a large piece of genetics. It's a large piece of the resiliency and the things that we train in early socialization. So there's a lot of factors that will determine your success with this, and the timing or the duration of how long you'll have to deal with this. But again, even when my dogs are older, I really try to make things like this positive. So a quick trip to the coffee shop where they get a treat, or I pair it with a treat. so that I'm still creating positive associations over a lifetime, because fears and phobias can often happen out of nowhere, or a single incident that was very traumatic that you can't always control. So we want to make sure that we're building lifelong positive associations, even when they're older, to try and prevent phobias and fears from occurring. And there's a lot we can do in puppyhood, but they do go through fear stages. So let's say there's a bike on your street and it's there 100% of the time, and it has been there for 6 weeks, and you walk outside or you walk past it and suddenly your puppy has a phobia or a fear to it, that's a very good indication that you are in a fear stage. During that stage, you want to be very careful of everything that puppy comes into contact with. So you want to make sure it is abundantly positive, there is so much distance, and that you're avoiding flooding. And that, again, you have equipped your puppy with, I love targeting for this. I love a lot of behaviors for this to help them get out if they need to. So I love a recall, a name recognition, targeting. I love all of those skills for helping a dog overcome a fear when you're in the moment. So do your best to work with it. Again, find short, successful blocks, and then repeat, and then try to build on those short, successful blocks each time, and allow latent learning to occur. So in between sessions, there's learning that occurs. So make sure each session is successful and positive, and then all of those sessions will build onto each other to create a really strong behavior and reinforcement history. So do not force it when your puppy seems afraid. Do not make them go see anything. Do not introduce a ton of things. So if you're afraid of a person, don't let that person come and just try to force your puppy into loving them. Really try to work with your puppy and provide them choices and opportunities to be successful. And try to do your best not to flood them. And once you see that they're afraid, try not to throw 6 different things at them to see what else they might be afraid to. When they're older, I actually love, I made a video about this, but I love putting something like a go see on a cue, where the dog actually starts to point to where the fearful object is. Because sometimes with dogs, it can be very novel and you'll have no idea. It can be a sudden backpack, or something that's been there all along that now is very scary. When you actually work with your dog and put it on a cue, they can go target it and check back in for a cookie. And now you know what the cue is, or what the stimulus is to which is causing the fear. That's a lot more advanced, but the short and dirty of it is don't force it. Try to make a positive association, try to create some distance, try to shape this and be able to create a protocol of desensitization and counter conditioning, and work with it and try not to flood if you can.
Awesome. So if anybody else has questions, I will unshare the screen. And if you want to put anything in the chat box, I know we went over a ton of stuff today. Yeah, that's a lot. So as you think of questions, feel free to pop them in that chat box. While we have you, Jen, do you want to tell us a little bit more about what offerings you have for puppies?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually have a free group called Positive Puppy Training and Support, and there's a little paw emoji. That has a ton of free resources all about all of this stuff that we talk about, the default behaviors that I showed, that I was kind of referring to. We also offer a online course that has everything you could possibly want to know about puppies, everything that I just mentioned, the default behaviors, the skill sets, how to introduce them, engage, disengage, click to calm, the progressive relaxation exercise, the name recognition, pretty much everything. I even have lessons on how to work with an older dog or tiny humans or cats. We have a lot of special bonus things, and a lot of things are always changing, like we're adding more separation things, how to create intentional separation, safe separation. And it comes with a free support group where you can post your questions and get actual support from a trainer. It'll either be me or one of my other trainers that will help you work through individual things. So you can post a video and get feedback. And if you want in-person help locally, we offer in-person training. We offer board and train. We are about to start offering some day training options for people that are super busy. And then, of course, we always offer our virtual consultations. Oh, we have questions. Yeah.
There we go. Question 1. What would be the ideal way to introduce people to my 5-month-old dog? We go out for a walk and she tends to bark at people a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would start, I'm more of, gosh, this is always on a spectrum. So this is not the only way you will do it. I will just kind of go through quickly my preferred way. I use Click to Calm for a protocol called Click to Calm by Emma Parsons for, gosh, pretty much everything. This includes the engage, disengage. You're basically clicking the trigger. So when your puppy looks at the person, you want to click and actually toss the treat or give a little distance by moving away from the trigger. So you're adding distance and you're redirecting them away from the person. Ideally, it's before your dog barks. So you'll have to learn their threshold. The next step is once they see a trigger, they will learn to check back in with you. So once they see the person, you can start to withhold the click whenever your dog is ready. But again, this can take weeks. Being super consistent. So your dog will see the person, check back in with you, get a cookie, and then you can slowly start to get closer and closer to them. Eventually, I like to introduce with a hand target or a foot target so they can have a safe way to be introduced to the person without the person just like leaning over, getting outstretched hands. That can be super scary. And then as soon as they do the foot or hand target, they're taught to immediately disengage so that they don't get over their head. One of the unfortunate things that can happen is that a dog will go say hello and then get in way too deep and they panic, and that can lead to growling, biting, urination, sometimes defecation. And so it's important to teach your puppy to quickly engage, and then they always have the option to disengage. So that's why I slowly work towards people. If you start to be working towards a person and your dog starts to freeze and not want to move any closer, it's a very clear sign that that is your threshold. So 1, create positive associations with the people. Make sure you have plenty of distance. And then I like to start with people who will work with me so you can give instructions and be able to start to close that threshold. I also think it's okay that dogs don't meet strangers. Like, your dog doesn't need to meet everyone. And just because you have a dog, that is not a free-for-all or a yes sign to humans to just approach a dog. And that's for us too. Just because there's a dog, please don't run up to them and say, like, can I pet your dog? So make sure that you're setting your dog up for success. Create a positive association, consider arousal, consider distance, and then teach a behavior that you would like your dog to do. It does not have to be a sit, take a stand, and make sure your dog has an option to move away if they want to. So I know that's kind of a multi-step process, but such is learning. Everything comes in a very multi-step pattern. So it is a lot of steps, but the first step is to start creating those positive associations and create the behavior you'd like your dog to do when he or she sees people. But again, positive associations is the very down and dirty answer.
Awesome.
Okay.
How do you choose which puppy to bring home?
My God, we could do another seminar just on that, even just on meeting people. Gosh, this is going to depend on what you're looking for in a puppy. So sometimes a calm, lower scoring puppy is not going to be the right fit for tiny humans, because that's going to mean that your puppy is going to be a bit more sensitive. Sometimes you don't always want the like workhorse nonstop dog that is just roughhousing with everyone and running over to you. That's a great dog for a lot of things, but not always for your companion dog. So you want somewhere in the middle. And gosh, there's a ton of ways that I test for this. I temperament test litters all the time. We have our own actual process that we do for selecting service dogs or therapy dogs. So if you have tiny humans, you want something pretty solid in the middle. I would even pay someone to go evaluate, ideally a applied animal behaviorist or a certified behavior consultant, someone who truly has experience. Not all dog trainers have experience with temperament tests, who has a history of doing this to really help you select, because the dog, the rescue, the breeder, what you come home to will really have at least 50% impact on what your adult dog will be. So calm is great for older people, maybe people who are retired, a calmer environment, not a dog that's going to go on the go with you. The overly energetic dog, gosh, is a great working dog. It's great for professional handlers, not always great for your beginning person. So it would depend on who you are, what you're looking for, and what you want in a dog. So again, so sorry, but it does depend. Okay, so our 5-month-old is very hesitant to walk or potty on damp grass, a minor problem for morning potty in the morning. Yes, with the morning dew. Any suggestions? We have found your methods have been really helpful, and that will make me cry. So one, just as like down for everyone else, is to try to go out in the rain when it's raining so that your puppy does have wet grass. Try to expose them early on to the feeling of just being wet. Sometimes we get our puppies at an older age, which is totally fine. I think that's also a great option for many families. Try to work slowly. So if you can even get like a paw, you can shape this, go just a tiny bit with a paw and let them come back. The morning potty is really hard because they will hold it. So I would create an alternative. So this could be turf on your patio. This could be turf in a pool in your garage. In my perfect world, you would have, right, like a backyard where there's a little bit of concrete or safety, if you will. So this might be a baby pool with grass or turf. So at least we're not flooding them every single time and we're teaching them to potty outside. If you don't want them to potty outside, I would do something like a grass patch in your house or some specific location, and you can train to that location. But if you are working outside, I would have an outside area that is not wet. So this can be something you create. You can create a little thing over it. You can cover it. There's a lot of ways you can get around the morning dew. And then expose your puppy super slowly. This is called desensitization. And again, Pavlov's always on your shoulder. So just creating those positive associations will be classical conditioning, counter conditioning into it, and go super slow. So a paw is great. Make that super positive. Make going on the grass just kind of every time you're on the grass, it's going to have treats. Every time you go off the grass, not so much. Use high value. Don't spare anything that is and considering behavior modification like this, you don't want to be stingy. So again, choose something super high value, go on the grass, then the treats happen. Watch your mechanics. So don't have the treats out and then go on the grass. Try to have them somewhere else, go on the grass, grab your treats, and then start doing it. The order is really, really important. So slow exposure, have an alternative. So that's your management plan, and slowly expose them to it. Great ways to do this is kind of at nighttime too. Like if you're in a humid area, it does get a little damp at nighttime, like South Carolina, Florida, things like that, and try to ease them into it. You can even use a sprinkler. So when it's dry, you can sprinkle just a tiny area of your yard and then kind of go, you can do a patterning exercise, which I show a lot, or the treat retreat where you go under the grass super quick and you beat, and then go off. So that would be another solution to start working with it whenever you want to. Have the dry grass and then the wet grass as a solution to get them outside, have an alternative of where they should potty. So there's training, management, and then a resolution. So hopefully that's helpful. That's a lot of things, but one of those should help.
Yeah. So the next one, we have a 3-month-old puppy who is going by and biting the older dog every time she gets up or moves. You say redirect, but what if she's already biting? Do I give her a toy? So it sounds like there was an older dog that had corrected the puppy a couple times and then everything stopped, but this dog is tolerating it. So how do we manage that?
Yeah, and also a Great Dane. So the dog is already large
Yeah.
at 3 months old. So what I would do is redirect. I would probably interrupt, redirect, and then she'll, is it a boy?
It's a girl.
Yes, okay, she. So if you redirect, reward for redirecting, and then pause, and then she's going to kind of look over, she will likely look over or start again. And what I would do is redirect, take your puppy away from the older dog, reward, ideally wait for a default behavior. You could start targeting, doing something to engage them, and then take a pause because you want to avoid behavior chains, which are I go bite the dog, I go get a cookie, and I go back to biting the dog, and then I get a cookie again. So you want to interrupt, redirect, pause, and then try to start rewarding so you avoid the chain. How you continue to avoid the chain is once your puppy is away from your dog, go grab a leash, go take your puppy elsewhere, and then slowly teach your puppy what you would want to do. So my idea, just quick and easy, is always have a leash handy when you have a puppy. Call your puppy away, reward, try to keep rewarding until you get your leash, add the leash, reward, because again, your puppy's already going to be in a high arousal state, so you don't want to create any biting or frustration with the leash. And then your puppy is going to look over at your older dog because she will want to go to the older dog, and you're going to start using engage, disengage. So this is your puppy's head. Puppy swivels head, you click, and you reward away. Puppy's going to swivel head again, you reward and treat. Oh, you click and treat away. At a certain point, it might be after 2, it might be after 1, it might be after 3, depending on the reinforcement history. Your dog's just going to look at you. You want to reward that more than once because you want looking at you to be more rewarding than looking at your older dog. And then I would slowly decrease your bubble to your older dog so that your puppy learns, like, you have 10 repetitions at least of what you would prefer after you've redirected. So try to avoid behavior patterns. Don't just interrupt, redirect, and let it happen again. Interrupt, redirect, and then have some sort of structure of teaching your dog what you would like to do. Also try to keep your puppy on leash so that when your older dog is moving or gets up, you can immediately start to desensitize that and teach your puppy what you would like to do. So that you are creating an association and also training your dog what you would prefer. So it's not really enough to continue interrupting and redirecting. We need a preferred and more desirable behavior to outweigh all of that so that eventually that's the behavior that will prevail. So prevent it, manage it. When it's happening because of whatever, which happens, interrupt, redirect, and then give your puppy 10 more opportunities of what you would prefer to happen as you get closer and closer and closer to the older dog. So try not to just interrupt, redirect, and send your puppy back because you're just going to create a chain and it's going to be more rewarding to keep biting your dog. So interrupt, redirect, and then 10 more opportunities of what you would prefer around your older dog. If your older dog comes, that's okay. I prefer to have older dogs trained like my younger dog. So typically what that would look like in my household is I interrupt, redirect, the puppy comes over to me. I wouldn't use a leash, but that's because I'm a trainer. And the puppy would look over at the dog. I would click, reward, maybe bring out magic mat. More than likely, the older dog will come over to me and offer that default sit or offer that default down. I would reward, say your dog's name. So older dog treat, younger dog treat. And now you've actually trained your dog of what you prefer. So please sit here while the older dog approaches. And you've also created a sharing circle for both dogs. And you're also working on name recognition. And you're also teaching them patience that when I don't say your name, it's not your turn to get the treat. So that's a lot of steps, but when you start doing that, it makes your life so much easier. So that's what I would do. It is a process, but again, learning is a process.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. I think that that is all we have for tonight. Thank you so much, everyone who came out tonight. Again, this will be recorded. We will send out the link tomorrow. I'll make sure that Jen's contact information and conscious dog training is on there. You have our information. We have webinars a couple times a month, so stay tuned for more opportunities coming up soon. Thank you all so much for coming out, and we will see you soon. All right. Have a good night. Bye.